Heyo everybody, I hope you're all doing well. Welcome to another episode of Powered by the Middle Finger. My name's Mike Evans and I'm the dude behind DIY RPG Productions, and as always the disclaimer is in the links below. In this episode we talk about the life-draining force known as children. Just kidding, that's not what this episode's about. No kids. In this episode, I continue looking at how Breath of the Wild influenced me as a game designer and really made me take a look at what I really wanted in a game and how I wanted to accomplish it. So with all that crap out of the way, let's cue the theme music. I really enjoyed the monsters in Breath of the Wild. They felt alive and engaging. They interact with the world in a way that I have seen from very few other video games. The monsters in Breath of the Wild actually engage with the world. They don't just stare at you, like that creepy person in the mall who just keeps... The monsters feel alive. They cook food, they chase bugs, they hunt, they fight with each other. It's really just an exciting thing to watch all on its own. Their attacks vary. They do different things that you have to anticipate. Additionally, when they miss, you see their frustration. Not all the time, but they do cute little animations. On a side note, I know one of the major gripes for Breath of the Wild is there wasn't a huge amount of enemy variation, and yeah, when you go from Zelda to Zelda, I guess it's true, but most games, that is one of the main complaints. It's all variations of a theme. Fire, ice, lightning, dark, shit. So what makes combat so engaging in Breath of the Wild is I feel like I'm actually fighting a creature and not just something that's plopped in for a battle. It's not just about the powers or the moveset or your abilities. It just doesn't feel as much like a choreographed dance as some other games. Another thing that made combat so fun was enemy camps. You could come across some enemy camp, and almost all of them have really fun and clever ways that you can go about killing their asses. I've never played a game where the physics and the environment were crafted just so precisely to give this kind of complete experience. Other games have gotten close, but the options to you in this are pretty unique. The developers really wanted to give the players the tools to interact with the environment in really cool and unique ways. And it's all done subtly, which also to me is great because I love the rules light stuff. Experimentation is rewarded in Breath of the Wild. Unlike when you pitch it in your marriage, and that shit almost never works out. The way combat works in Breath of the Wild, it actually reminds me a lot of old school role-playing. It's not about the abilities and the powers you have. I mean, although those are cool, it's about stacking the odds in your favor. What items do you have in your pouch that are going to turn the fucking tides in your favor? I like player smarts versus character smarts, especially in combat situations. I get it when you're investigating, trying to solve a riddle, which, no, even that, I think fucking players should use their brains and not their characters' brains to do that shit. I'm fucking rambling. Stop judging me! The last thing I'll say about combat with Breath of the Wild, what I love about it, is it feels like every attack matters.
I want you to hit me as hard as you can.
I really had a great time playing the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I thought it was a great game and had a really fun story, but It's basically a 50-hour movie where you walk through hallways and predetermined spaces until you get to the combat. And then the player is showered in a particle effect bukkake, or it's a cutscene. So combat is either this or this.
Sometimes there's so much beauty in the world. I feel like I can't take it.
There are a few of them, but I think it's few and far between in Breath of the Wild compared to a lot of other games. I just don't feel like there's the HP sponges in Breath of the Wild as there are in so many other games that are just meant to draw out combat in the most boring way possible. And I know that several versions of Dungeons and Dragons fall prey to that. Breath of the Wild's combat is done in real time like many other action adventure RPG video games. It chews to the fat in a way that bogs other games down. It gets right to the point. It doesn't get bogged down by stat boosts or percentages or weird chance on hit effects that you see in so many other RPGs. It may be there in the back end, but it's not front forward in a way that fucks with the player and their ability to grok the game. And speaking of grokking, this brings us to as I mentioned in part 1 of this video, the players start with nothing. You wake up in a chamber and are basically told to go save the fucking world. But you get to learn everything through player agency, where you go and what you decide to do. This gives the player a chance to get acclimated to the world and get their footing and not become overwhelmed by lore, abilities, skills, attacks, armor, so on and so forth. No 2.5 hours to create a goddamn character. No 5-hour fucking tutorial. I think abilities tend to overwhelm players, especially casual players. By the time that you have conquered Breath of the Wild, you have a bunch of weapon slots and shield slots and bow slots, potentially, if you've gotten a bunch of Korok seeds. But you have 8 abilities. That's not including the ones that are the camera and the motorcycle, but they're fun and useful. The numerous amount of abilities is what really burnt me out on 3.5 and Pathfinder. Let's look at Pathfinder, for example.
I promise I'm not picking on Pathfinder.
Players that choose a human as their race start with 6 things that they have to jot down, be it abilities or skills or whatever. But if you choose a dwarf, you have 12. You have 12 fucking things that you have to write down on your character sheet, and some of the descriptions are a paragraph. And then the player has to choose a class. So fighter pretty much is the simplest class ever to cut your teeth on, especially if you're a new player. And you have just a few things of note. With a fighter, you have 1 ability and 2 things that you have to make notations on your character sheet, be it like a skill or a proficiency or whatever. By 6th level, you have 7 abilities, which isn't too terrible, but still can be intimidating for new or casual players. But when you look at a more complicated class, say for example the monk, when you start, you have 4 abilities and 3 things to note. By 6th level, you have 14 abilities. That's just the class. That's not any racial ability. So if you're a 6th level dwarf monk, that's 26 abilities that you have to be aware of on your character sheet. That's not including things like magical equipment and items, potions, or spell effects.
I had to remind myself to breathe.
The simplicity and elegance of Breath of the Wild was just so fucking refreshing to me, and it got me excited about a game in a way that I hadn't been for a long, long time. And it really just made me appreciate that about tabletop games as well. Thank you all so much for watching another episode of Powered by the Middle Finger. If you like it, please hit that like button, subscribe, push that notification bell. I will be releasing more content as I'm able. Next episode of Dev Talk, we will be looking at how Breath of the Wild handled rewards and puzzles. Be well, everybody.